Bonjour and benvenue, mon ami. In tonight's episode of the Wicked Webs We Weave podcast, we'll be visiting the haunted Mortuary, located on 4800 Canal Street, New Orleans, Louisiana. Each October, New Orleanians flock to the Mortuary haunted house for one thing: terror. As one of Louisiana's most popular haunted house attractions, the Mortuary has found itself on more than a few national best haunted house attractions lists. People will wait for the chance to go to the Greek Revival Mansion, so it only makes sense that these thrill-seekers rest against the iron gates to one of the oldest cemeteries in the Hope Mausoleum, which was established in the early 1846. Tonight we will go into the history of this not only haunted attraction, but a real-life paranormal bed of activity, and the history of it being a funeral home dates far into the rich history of New Orleans. So join me into the proverbial fire, my friends. Sit back and dwell in the darkness, and thank you again for joining me in the Wicked Webs We Weave podcast. I am your host, Ryan Mckern. Join me now as we take the streetcar down to Cemetery End of Canal Street in New Orleans. The Mortuary is a very large Victorian mansion. You can find it at 4800 Canal Street. This is a place that is close to many hearts in the area of New Orleans. It is this location that many people would travel to pay their last respects to those who have passed. The mansion was located at the end of the street with the cemeteries. There are many stories surrounding the property. Its history. The mortuary was built by Mary Slattery, Irish immigrants. It was built to be a mansion for the family to use. It was supposed to be used to house her family for generations to come. This is the plan in 1872. When it was built, however, she acquired additional land by the year 1880. She and her husband, John, had 6 children. 8 of them lived in their home. They had a son named John Jr. He would be a stonecutter, as well as a sexton, for the cemetery near the home. The home was very large and accommodated not only the 8 family members, but 2 friends as well. The home would house Mr. John Kahn and his wife. The home would eventually be sold in 1905 to William Klein and Marie Lafront. The home would remain in the possession of Marie until 1923. The home would be passed on to a notary. He was E. Howard McCabe in 1928. The home was purchased by McCabe on behalf of McMahon. The intent for the property was to be the biggest and grandest funeral home. It wasn't until 1930 that the undertaking company would start advertising. The company was called P.J. McMahon and Sons. There were photos in the booklet that showed the inside and outside of the mansion. It would describe the many services it had offered as well. At this time, the building was considered to be a wonder due to its beautiful architecture. It had a neoclassic style exterior and a Victorian style interior. It was in 1933 that the name of the building was changed to P.J. McMahon and Sons. In 1959, renovations were being done to add new features to the building. The building would feature some of the nicest amenities that were found only in the nicest mansions. The building was undergoing a very ambitious project. It would have an elevator, more viewing rooms, a back garage to be used to discreetly deliver the dead bodies, and so many more amenities. There would be a smoking parlor, separate baths, dining options, and more. After the building renovations, the mansion would be a full-service funeral home. This meant that there would be an embalming room, autopsy room, storage room, casket storage and sales, and a crematorium. There were also flower sales on site as well. They were thinking about every aspect of the business. There were well over 20,000 different funerals inside the mansion. Today, the mortuary is used for many things. When not in haunt season, and being used for murder mystery parties, ghost detection parties, and other private events. During Mardi Gras season, you can buy king cakes outside. In 1985, the company decided to merge with another known as Security Industrial Funeral Home Corporation. The property then again be sold in 1996. It was sold to Lewin L.A. Holdings. This would later be known as Alderwoods. It was at this time that the funeral home would do away with many of the amenities that were added. They were doing this to save money, in an effort to reduce cost. However, the business suffered. Keeping a 130-year-old mansion up was taking its toll. The property was then sold in 2004 to EHN2 Holdings. The company that purchased the building wanted to turn it into an academy for a day spa. The first task was to gut the entire property because of the many hazards and the hazardous materials and poor conditions of the building. At this time, everything was removed from the home. There were no original items from the home except the wood frames, staircases, and doors. During the renovations, the CEO of the corporation that bought the building died under very mysterious circumstances. The board then decided to sell the property. It was completely empty and gutted. It would have remained abandoned for 3 years. Hurricane Katrina. The building would survive the hurricane because it was not subject to flooding due to being located in higher grounds. The basement did get flooding, however, and it wasn't until 2007 that the home was purchased again by Jeff Bourne, who had turned the decaying building into a haunted house. It is designed to provide people with excellent excitement and thrill, as well as terror. The dream was to turn into one of the best haunted houses during the Halloween season. However, little did he know, there were many tales that surrounded the property. Rebuilding the mansion. When the crew had walked property, they found it was in very bad shape. It needed a lot of repairs. However, they had to be extremely careful. The walls were covered in graffiti, and there were holes in the floors. If the workers did not watch their step, they would fall through the top floor and possibly end up in the basement. The man who purchased the building would plan to rebuild and open that same year. Little did he know, his plan was about to quickly change. It was during this time that he was approached by paranormal investigators. They had wanted to investigate the home because of the previous owners. There have been many strange occurrences and reports since the home was a funeral home. It is said that many of the souls that were inside the funeral home had decided to never leave. It was at this time that the building was investigated for paranormal activity. There are a few stories that surround the former funeral home. There is a woman who's dressed in white. You can often see her on the top floor of the building crying. Her husband had passed and she sits there in despair. Another legend states that a well-dressed tall man appears once in a while. The man will only appear if he believes that people are disrespecting the cemeteries that are next door. It is said that he punishes the offenders by silencing them. It is also said that there are 2 children in the home as well. These children will play pranks on the living. It is a boy and a girl who are responsible. Photographs of the young girl have been taken near the staircase by the mortuary employees and caretakers. There is a mortician who used to work there that is seen by employees. He would continue his work in the basement of the home. You can also hear footsteps and voices in the home, even when there's no one inside. In the basement is also right below the cemetery, and it has been recorded various temperature changes in different parts of the room, making dramatic peaks in equipment, as well as female paranormal investigators also talking to the men of the spirits of the house and getting activity. Another activity others enjoy to get a response is to try and talk with the children and get them to play with toys and call aloud for them to speak and interact with the investigators. That isn't even the scariest part. There's said to be a poltergeist activity. Furniture will move all by itself and scare people. When the paranormal investigators came, it was successful. Since this, there have been many other investigators and hunters. The home was not turned into a haunted house, but a training area for future paranormal investigators and hunters. He was hoping to prove that the world that ghosts do exist. You can visit the mortuary and learn how to use ghost hunting equipment. You can learn the stories of the building and find your own ghost. Keep in mind that this is one of the most haunted places in America. You can tour the building's beautiful structures. The building was restored to much of the original appearance. The house still has 2 cemeteries that surround it. You can come here to experience some history and hauntings while learning to use equipment from paranormal ghost hunters. No matter why you visit, leaving this mansion will have you take a little different look at death. A man bought this property in hopes of turning into a haunted house. Little did he know he didn't have to. It was already haunted enough. People would come just because of the history of the building and the legends that precede. Part of the land was acquired from the next-door cemetery, the Hebrew congregation of Temei Derech, now Hope Mausoleum, spanning nearly the 3 blocks in its entirety, from Gasquet Street, which is now Cleveland, to Canal, and Anthony to Bernadette. The Greek revival that was erected was considered one of the most beautiful in the area, a perfect portrait of aristocratic New Orleans. Tombstones were all they could see with the Irish immigrants' flatteries. The Slatteries could see while the Jewish cemetery sat to their left. Another now extant cemetery rested behind them. Not even 2 blocks up the road was Metairie Cemetery, which houses thousands of the dead. As the mortuary's owner, Jeff Bourne, was once recorded as saying, "The mortuary is a haunted house and a real haunted house. We're probably in the middle of probably 1 million graves within a square mile radius of this building, starting within inches away from the building. Following the various paranormal groups who held ghost hunts at the Mortuary house, Jeff Bourne decided to capitalize on the interest, and by that we mean Jeff Bourne went all out. He set up over 30 cameras all over the mortuary, all the better capture any strange mists or apparitions roaming the halls. Those cameras included night vision cams, color, and thermal types as well. Bourne was ready to discover just what was haunting the Greek Revival mansion. There were also microphones and audio equipment installed in the hope that some phantom's voice might be caught over EP. During the first few years of being open, Bourne didn't just stop at operating an attraction. The mortuary also offered ghost tours, billing as well as overnight ghost hunts. Unfortunately, the Mortuary house no longer hosts tours of paranormal investigations, choosing instead to focus on the recent popular escape rooms, which have garnered a lot of fame in the last year or two. Of the many phantoms which had been seen or reported at the Mortuary house, there are a few that stand out to our staff members or guests who have had the luck to run into them. The girl ghost and her possible suitor. A female spirit is known to haunt the top floor of the neoclassical building, crying, it's assumed, for a husband who passed away decades ago. It's uncertain if the ghost of a well-dressed man seen on the property is the female spirit's husband, or if he's an entirely different specter completely. What can be said about the top-hat-clad gentleman is that he is often seen clambering through the cemetery Hope Mausoleum next door. According to the local lore, his ghost is only known to appear when people are completely disrespecting the cemetery. A note on the cemetery established in 1840s, Hope Mausoleum would give St. Louis Cemetery No. 1 a run for its money in terms of disorderliness. There is a lack of pathways, and many of the tombs and headstones lay directly on the top of each other. This author even found struck in a corner of the cemetery taking photos. Only way out was to climb over the tombstones in front of the graveyard. Playful ghost and somber mortician. Other ghosts in the mortuary house are the spirits of two young children who enjoy to romp around and play at the manors all day. They are also known to play pranks on the living, as most kids want to do. There is also the former mortician who haunts the property, though his presence and apparition is most commonly seen by employees downstairs in the old morgue. At the time of its construction in 1923, the small area beside the elevator in the basement was used as an old workshop or autopsy room. The ghostly mortician has only been spotted down in the basement, but according to those who have seen him, they are more than a little convinced that he is unable to leave his bloody work even after death. While there are few distinct spirits known at the mortuary, for the most part, reports of the former funeral home generally include disembodied footsteps as well as whispering or ghosts, though no one is ever there. In more robust situations, furniture has actually skidded across the floor, in full view of the shocked employees. The mortuary's ghosts certainly aren't shy, however. Cody McLean, a former employee of the mortuary, but currently the assistant general manager for Hotel St. Pierre and the Andrew Jackson Hotel, told us of a private employee-only investigation that he, the manager Lance, and a friend did a few years ago. They were set up in the Red Theater upstairs, and apparently it wasn't long before the strange occurrences started occurring. As Cody explained, it was probably my imagination playing tricks on me, but I walked into the middle of the room and we just called for Sarah to come visit us. That was when we felt something grab his wrist. Not willing to see what wrapped their fingers around his wrist, Cody figured that he was his cue to leave and bolted out. While it's possible that this was his imagination, there's a good chance that it was not his mind playing tricks on him. After all, he called out to the female spirit to join them. Please do visit the Mortuary house during Halloween time, or they're one of their many escape room attractions. I would like to thank GhostCityTours.com, NolaGhost.com, in research for this episode. If you liked tonight's content, please leave a like on the video and subscribe for weekly updates and uploads on the paranormal, New Orleans, and beyond. I am your host, Ryan Mckern. Thank you for joining me once again on this very haunted funeral parlor edition of the Wicked Webs We Weave podcast. And until we meet again, my friends, au revoir.